Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Gopi Jana Ballava Giribaradhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Jayavishpat Paramahansa Parivrajakcharyas, Titus Sismatis, Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki, Shri Prabhupada Lilamrta Ki, Sankirtan Yagya Ki, Gaur Premanande, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. Ekadasi Vrata Ki, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Volume 4. Chapter. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrta, volume 4, in every town and village around the world. Chapter 29, unlimited opportunity, limited time. And we are currently in New Vrindavan. It is May the 21st, 1969. Accompanied by Kirtanananda Swami and Hayagriva, Prabhupada then traveled from Columbus to the New Vrindavan Farm project in the hills of West Virginia. When their car got stuck in a neighbor's garden near the entrance to the property, Prabhupada decided to walk the final 2 miles along the muddy access road that led to the farm. The road soon ended, however, and Prabhupada and his 2 guides picked up a footpath entering the dense forest. The mid-May trees were still coming into foliage, and the sunlight broke through the branches to a carpet of brilliant purple phlox. Prabhupada walked quickly ahead of Kirtanananda Swami and Hayagriva, who hurried to keep up. A winding creek repeatedly crossed the path, and Prabhupada would cross by stepping from stone to stone. The road, he said, would not be difficult to travel by ox cart. The forest was like a jungle, just as he had expected and wanted. For the past year, Prabhupada had corresponded with Kirtanananda Swami and Hayagriva concerning New Vrindavan, and this correspondence had established the direction for Krishna-conscious country living. Prabhupada had said he wanted the community based on Vedic ideals. Everyone living simply, keeping cows and working the land. The devotees would have to develop these ideas gradually. It would take time. But even in the beginning, the keynote should be simple living and high thinking. Because the community would remain completely aloof from the city, it would at first appear inconvenient and austere. But life would be peaceful, free from the anxieties of the artificial urban society based on hard work for sense gratification. And most important, the members of such a community would be serving Krishna and chanting his name. Sometimes devotees have a picture in their minds, an idea or a desire, you could say, some conception in their minds that we will get a farm and we will have cows and they will give milk and we'll have plenty of milk and we will grow vegetables and we'll have plenty of vegetables and we will be peaceful, life will be good, life will be easy, no hard work and haribol. It takes more than that to farm, as devotees found out. Farming is not so easy that you just do like what we just said. Cows are like people. Cows have personalities. Cows, like people, get sick, get irritable, get tired, and like that. And they need vets fairly regularly. And growing veggies, well, of course, it's nice growing veggies. I remember we were in Caterridge, we had, what did we have? 120 acres, I think it was, 50 hectare, or something like that. It was not small at all. And we would grow veggies, but usually we focused on one crop at a time. So I remember eating brinjal for about 3 months, breakfast, lunch, and in the evening, and all the maha from the deities. Yeah. And we had a beautiful lake, this beautiful lake at the bottom of the property, which unfortunately a couple of people drowned in. And so in the end, we employed 2 people, nice people, very nice. They're still around. We see them sometimes on festivals. We employed 2 to do the farming. That was the farming taken care of. And it was more peaceful, but we were going into the city every day. Basically, we were living sort of like city people, but in the country, something like that. Because farming, that is a big job, and it's not an easy job at all. And particularly if one was to try to do subsistence farming, to become independent of regular civilization. We had 1 telephone, that I can say. We only had 1 telephone in the whole place amongst 50 devotees. And this telephone, you had to grind it, and then you'd get the operator up in Camperdown or somewhere. Then they put the call out to wherever. And that phone was well used. So, it may sound a little sarcastic, but it's not really. That's what it was like. We were city people living city-style lives, but in the country. Yes, and to actually do what Srila Prabhupada's talking about, it really takes some effort. It really takes some effort to do. From morning till night. Oh yeah. So, but Srila Prabhupada wanted it because it is a foundational part of Vedic civilization, Krishna conscious Vedic civilization. And Srila could happen just any time. It would not be at all difficult in the current political and psychological atmosphere. So Srila Prabhupada foresaw a time after that when people, so many citizens, just the regular people, would be in great distress due to the very fabric of the current materialistic society having been broken and, just disabled and destroyed, at least in many cases, and the people just more or less left to their own devices. Survive if you can, and we wish you the best of luck. Because the government, the competency of the government, particularly in those types of regards, is really zero. So Srila Prabhupada, as is stated here, he wanted them to remain completely aloof from the city, and it would at first appear inconvenient and austere. And it definitely did. But life would be peaceful and so on like that. Simple living and high thinking. So many devotees have had this type of desire and idea. Not many have successfully implemented it and really put it into effect. Not many. Yes. So Prabhupada spoke little, making his way along the path as if at his own home. They stopped beside the creek, and Prabhupada sat down on a blanket Kirtanananda Swami and Hayagriva spread for him on the grass. "We are stopping for Kirtanananda," Prabhupada said. "He is tired." Not Prabhupada is tired. Of course, Kirtanananda had a disability. Yeah, one of his legs was shorter than the other. It used to be not uncommon. I used to see it amongst the Indian population here. Now it's not as common. But, yeah, something goes wrong. Well, he had polio, actually, as a child. So one of the legs ended up shorter, and therefore he would always walk, compensating or whatever for that. But in a sense, it's a little amusing. Srila Prabhupada this is 1969. Prabhupada's about 73 or so. He's not young at all, but he doesn't say, "I'm tired." We are stopping for Kirtanananda. He is tired. May sound a little amusing, but he probably was. Prabhupada and his party drank water from the creek, rested briefly, and then continued. As they rounded a curve in the road, Prabhupada could see a clearing on the ridge ahead, a small frame house and a barn stood at the lower end of the ridge. These two ancient structures, Hayagriva explained, were the only buildings on New Vrindavan's 120 acres. As no vehicles traveled here, the paths were overrun with high grass. A willow spread its branches close by the old house. The settlement was the picture of undisturbed, primitive life. Prabhupada liked the simple life at New Vrindavan, and whatever simple thing the devotees offered him, he accepted with satisfaction. They served him freshly ground wheat cereal cooked in milk, and he said it was wonderful. When he saw the kitchen's dirt floor covered with cow dung, he approved, saying it was just like in an Indian village. Prabhupada also liked his room in the attic, directly above the temple room. He brought out the small Radha Krishna deities he'd been traveling with for the last month and a half, and had his servant Devananda improvise an altar on a small table to one side of the room, arranging his two trunks as a desk and placing a picture of his spiritual master on one of the trunks. Prabhupada immediately resumed his usual schedule. He would take his late morning massage sitting outside and then bathe with warm water in an improvised outdoor shower stall. Kirtanananda Swami prepared Prabhupada's usual lunch of dal, rice, and chapatis, plus some local pokeweed. I'm not familiar with it, but it sounds like one of these local greeneries that just grow. You'd be surprised what things that just grow can be utilized. Did any of you ever cook or try cooked stinging nettles? Are you familiar with stinging nettles? You must be a real city boy. Stinging nettles? Yeah, stinging nettles. Not so much. They grow in farm areas. They just grow, and you've got to be a little careful because they do sting. But when you cook them, they're edible. I wouldn't say, I've had them a few times. I wouldn't say they're particularly nice, but they're definitely edible. Just like when sometimes I speak Russian to devotees, Russian speakers who know Russian like we know English. And I ask them, is it okay, my Russian okay? And they say, it's understandable. Really, so stinging nettles, they're edible. I guess you could acquire a taste for them. So anyway, yeah, Prabhupada had some of the local pokeweed. The previous summer, Kirtanananda Swami and Hayagriva had picked and canned blackberries, which they now served Prabhupada as blackberry chutney. The chapatis were from freshly milled whole wheat, and everything was cooked over a wood fire. The best fuel for cooking, Prabhupada said, was cow dung. Wood was second, gas third, and electricity last. Prabhupada spent much of the day out of doors under a persimmon tree about 100 feet from the house. There he would sit and read at a low table one of the men had built. Often he would look up from his reading and gaze across the deep valley to the distant ridge, where the forest met the sky. In the late afternoon, devotees would gather under the persimmon tree with Prabhupada, sitting and talking with him until after sunset. Sri Sri Radha Radhanath Sri Giri Govardhan Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. They saw Prabhupada's living with them as a practical demonstration of New Vrindavan's importance. If he, the greatest devotee, could be satisfied living simply and chanting Hare Krishna in this backwoods setting, then they should follow his example. Comparing New Vrindavan to the Vrindavan in India, Prabhupada said that New Vrindavan was in some ways better, since Vrindavan, India, was now congested with worldly men. 500 years ago, the Goswami followers of Lord Chaitanya had excavated the sites of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, and only pure devotees had lived there. But in recent years, Vrindavan had become a place for materialists and impersonalists. And, they're talking about 1969. What about 2022? Gosh. Oh yeah, it's just so different. I remember 1976, the first time I went there. Our Krishna Balaram temple was basically sort of on the edge of the town, or almost just about outside of Vrindavan. There was the Vrindavan research, there was the, Fogla Ashram. Then there was some other little place, a couple of little places. Then there was the Vrindavan Research Institute. And then there was a gap to the Krishna Balaram temple. But now, you go a few kilometers past the Krishna Balaram temple on the road out to Chatika, to the main Delhi Agra highway, and there's all this high rise, all these blocks of flats, and gosh, it's another world altogether. New Vrindavan, however, should admit only the spiritually inclined. In Vedic society, Prabhupada said, everyone had been satisfied to live like this, in a small village beside a river. Factories were unnecessary. Prabhupada wanted this Vedic way of life for the entire world. And New Vrindavan could serve as a model for the benefit of the masses. New Vrindavan had no phone, and mail had to be fetched by a 2-mile walk. In this, Prabhupada said, New Vrindavan was like Vrindavan, India. Both Vrindavans lacked in modern amenities. Lacked, past tense. This quote-unquote difficulty, however, coupled well with the Vaishnava philosophy that modern amenities were not worth the trouble required to get them. A devotee, accepting whatever nature provides, spends his time and energy in spiritual life. New Vrindavan's only cow was a black and white crossbreed named Kalia. And Prabhupada would drink a little of her milk morning, noon, and night. I haven't tasted milk like this in 65 years, he said. One day he predicted New Vrindavan would have many cows, and their udders would be so full that the dripping milk would muddy the pastures. Although people in the West were blind to their great sin of cow slaughter and its grievous karmic reactions, he said, New Vrindavan would demonstrate to the world the social, moral, and economic advantages of protecting the cow and utilizing her milk rather than killing her and eating her flesh. Prabhupada wanted the New Vrindavan devotees to build cottages. He wanted many buildings, even if at first they were primitive. And he gave a plan for a simple structure of baked mud. He also wanted a Krishna-conscious school, and the country, he said, would be the best place for it. The city is made by man, and the country is made by God, Prabhupada said, paraphrasing the British poet Cowper. The young students should learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, and at the same time they should become pure devotees. In their play, they could imitate the pastimes of Krishna and his cowherd boyfriends, with one child massaging Krishna, another wrestling with Krishna, just as in the spiritual world. The women in New Vrindavan, Prabhupada said, should care for the children, clean the temple, cook for the deities, and churn butter. He had many plans for New Vrindavan, and he was only giving idea seeds with few details. You develop it to your heart's content, he told Kirtanananda Swami. An ideal Vedic community with the members producing all their own food and necessities was what Prabhupada wanted. Unless the devotees at New Vrindavan could become self-sufficient, he said, there was no use in their occupying such a big piece of land. Even before Prabhupada's visit to New Vrindavan, he had requested Kirtanananda Swami and Hayagriva to plan for 7 temples on the property. These 7 temples should be named after the major temples of old Vrindavan: Madan Mohan, Govindaji, Gopinath, Radha Damodar, Radha Raman, Shamsundar, and Radha Gokulananda. Prabhupada said he would personally serve he would personally secure Radha Krishna deities for each temple. It was inevitable that Prabhupada would leave New Vrindavan. Letters from London, Los Angeles, and San Francisco compelled him to travel. On the day of his departure, the New Vrindavan devotees teased him, saying he couldn't go. Kirtanananda Swami went so far as to say they would block his way on the road, but Prabhupada corrected him. You can't do that to the spiritual master. Accompanied by Kirtanananda Swami and the New Vrindavan devotees, Prabhupada walked along the forest path. The New Vrindavan countryside was verdant, the summer air hot and moist. Prabhupada was silent. He had come here to encourage his disciples, and he himself had also become encouraged. Here was simple village life as Krishna himself had lived it, depending on the land and the cow. That cow, Kalia, had given such nice milk. New Vrindavan's cows were not ordinary. They knew they would not be killed. So far, only a few devotees were here, but by Krishna's grace, more would come. Yeah, out at Cato Ridge, we had a little more than 30 animals. The majority were actually cows, and there was a small number. Somehow or other it worked out like that. We never sold any, or we never gave any away. But somehow or other there was, out of 32 or 3 or something animals, there were maybe 5 or between 5 and 7, something like that, that were oxen. The rest were all females. So we got milk. We got milk. And our cowherd man, Bindu Madhava Prabhu, he would, what would we do? We'd make butter from cream. We had a machine which would extract, as you turn it, the milk comes out and the cream comes out one side. He would churn the cream to make butter with an electric drill with a paddle on the end of it, which, it would spin around. And we would have ice cream we had a Monday morning feast. Some of you who were there might remember. Mother Radhanath would remember. Anyway. Yeah, so we had every Monday morning. Sunday was the program for the guests, and we'd get a fair number. And they would get biryani, dal, a salad, and an orange-type drink. And on Monday morning, the devotees would get a feast, sure. And with ice cream. And the ice cream was exactly that. It was iced cream. It was only full cream with sugar. Hare Krishna. Okay. Right. Prabhupada and Kirtanananda Swami walked together along the forest path, saying little, but their mutual understanding was deep. Prabhupada hadn't given him many specific instructions. A few words while sitting or walking together outdoors, a gesture, a facial expression of pleasure or concern. Kirtanananda Swami could understand, however, that New Vrindavan was very dear to his spiritual master and should become dear to him also. Prabhupada assured him that because the devotees of New Vrindavan were centered on chanting Hare Krishna, serving the deities and protecting the cows, Krishna would bless them with success. We had one experience, just a nice experience we had, when we were making the DVD about Nandagram. We went to a village just some distance out to the north of Nandagram. You can see it from up on the top of, looking out from the temple there. Mehrana. Mehrana is the birthplace of Mother Yashoda, and there's a nice temple there with a special shrine with the deity of Mother Yashoda. And there was this really nice old devotee sadhu living there, and he was looking after, he was the pujari, and he was everything. And the temple had a cow, one cow. And we were there, and he didn't speak English. He knew Dina Bandhu Prabhu well. But we managed, to communicate with him, and he was just so nice to us. And we were videoing and looking around and all these things. And he suddenly disappeared for a few minutes. And then he came back and he said, "I milked the cow for you, and I've made some tea for you." Milk, just milk with tea. And we had to explain to him that we don't drink tea. He didn't know about such things. So then he said, "Just wait a few minutes." And he milked the cow again and made us some hot milk. Yeah. I mean, there was, I think, 4 of us there. Yeah, and he made some nice, each of us had a cup of hot milk, really directly from the cow. It was nice. Okay. Where are we? So, where did I get up to? Oh, okay, we got up to there. At the end of the 2-mile walk, Prabhupada, surrounded by his followers, stood beside the car that was to take him to the airport in Pittsburgh, from where he would fly to Los Angeles. His suitcases, which had come out on a horse-drawn cart, were loaded into the car's luggage compartment, and Prabhupada got in the back seat. Amid cries of "Hare Krishna" and "Prabhupada," the car pulled out onto the country highway, and Prabhupada continued chanting Hare Krishna on his beads. Prabhupada had been hearing regularly from his 6 disciples in London. Having little money and living as separate couples in different parts of the city, they found their greatest inspiration in Prabhupada's letters. They would repeatedly read his instructions and dream of when he would one day visit them in London. Although in San Francisco, Krishna consciousness had been fun for the 3 couples, in England it was becoming more and more difficult. The devotees, being foreigners, were not allowed to earn a salary, and except for a few contacts, they knew no one. Although unable to live together, they were trying to maintain their morale and Krishna consciousness. Yamuna. I had to move to a Jamaican ghetto, the top floor of one of the buildings. It was awful. Day after day after day, I would sit and listen to a tape of Prabhupada singing. It was a beautiful tape he had just done in Los Angeles, and I would pray to him, "Please come, please come." Mukunda. Letters, that's what kept us alive. Prabhupada would write and say, "I'm coming." 2 or 3 times he wrote to say, "I'm coming by March." And we would write back and say we wanted to get a place first. We really felt it wouldn't be right for him to come unless we had a place first. He wrote a letter to my wife, quote, I was planning to come by March, but your husband is not allowing me. What can I do?" Unquote. The devotees in London had not seen Prabhupada in 4 months, and still there was no date set for his visit. Although they sometimes became discouraged and talked of going back to America, they persevered. Prabhupada had promised he would come when they got a temple. And that promise helped them remember that they were personally serving him. They felt that he was doing the work and they were his assistants. His absence was only external. By his instructions, whether written, spoken, or remembered in the heart, he was always with them. He was constantly directing them. While trying out various schemes to popularize Krishna consciousness in London, Shamsundar arranged for a program to which he invited many of London's prominent citizens. About 100 people responded to Shamsundar's formal invitation, 1 member of parliament, a few government officials, but mostly young people. The devotees served a feast and showed a film of Srila Prabhupada walking by Stowe Lake in Golden Gate Park. Prabhupada had sent a tape recording specifically for the evening, and the devotees highlighted it as the evening's special attraction, even though they hadn't had time to hear it in advance. Gurudas started the tape, and suddenly there was Prabhupada's voice, quote, "Ladies and gentlemen, please accept my greetings in the happy year of 1969 and blessings of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, for your kindly participating in this happy meeting of Krishna consciousness," unquote. Although Prabhupada had recorded the tape in the quiet of his room in Los Angeles, the devotees were astonished to feel Prabhupada's direct presence, preaching Krishna consciousness to the English. Quote, "Lord Chaitanya informed us that the absolute Supreme Personality of Godhead can descend in transcendental sound vibration, and thus, when we chant Hare Krishna mantra offenselessly, we immediately contact Krishna and his internal energy. Thus, we become immediately purified from all dirty things in our heart," unquote. The guests sat listening politely as Prabhupada described the soul's travail of transmigrating from body to body and the path of the soul's liberation through chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna consciousness was, quote, "transcendentally colorful and full of transcendental pleasure," unquote. Chanting could be done anywhere, on the street, in the park, or at home. Prabhupada concluded his talk, quote, "But to assemble and sit together, we require a place for congregation. Therefore, a temple of the Krishna consciousness movement is required to be established in various centers in the world, irrespective of the particular country's culture, philosophy, and religion. Krishna consciousness is so universal and perfect that it can appeal to everyone, irrespective of his position. Therefore, I fervently appeal to you, all present in this meeting, to extend your cooperation for successful execution of this great movement, thanking you once more," unquote. There was a pause, and then Prabhupada began playing the harmonium and singing Hare Krishna. Afterward, he again spoke, quote, My disciples in London have very eagerly asked me to visit there, and I'm also very anxious to see you all. So as soon as there's opportunity, I shall go with my Sankirtan party, who are now engaged in Los Angeles, and that will be a great pleasure for you all to meet together. That is all," unquote. Only a few weeks after this meeting, the group received their first important publicity. A photo of the 6 devotees in Little Saraswati appeared with an article by the famous columnist Atticus in the Sunday Times. Guru Das was quoted as saying, "Hare Krishna is a chant which sets God dancing on your tongue. Try chanting Queen Elizabeth and see the difference." The article described the missionary group from America as, quote, "very gentle people, a bit unworldly, but not at all ingenuous," unquote. Citing their renunciation of illicit sex and intoxication, the article commented, "Tame, you might think, but they look very well on it. And what's likely to earn them a public is their chanting," unquote. Within a few days, the same article appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle, but with a new headline, quote, "Krishna Chants Startle London," unquote. Prabhupada was pleased when he saw the headline. Indeed, his Grihasta disciples had succeeded where his sannyasi godbrothers had failed. Although several of Prabhupada's scholarly godbrothers had lectured around England over the last 35 years, only one person, an elderly English lady named Elizabeth Bowtell, had shown interest. Yamuna had written Prabhupada to find out if they should visit Mrs. Bowtell. She had received the name Vinod Vani Dasi, and Prabhupada had replied, quote, "The history of this Vani Dasi is that she is an old lady and has a house and has hung a sign, Gaudiya Mat, but that is all." If they liked, Prabhupada had said, they could pay her a courtesy call and see if she would let them use their place for kirtans. One of the men had gone to see her at her home several hours out of the city, but from behind her closed door, she had refused to meet with him unless he brought an introductory letter from the Gaudiya Mat in New Delhi. Vinod Vani Dasi was the fruit of 35 years of sannyasis preaching in England, whereas in 4 months, Prabhupada's young American missionaries were, quote unquote, startling London. After months of living scattered throughout the city, the devotees met a landlord who allowed them to stay together rent-free in a vacant warehouse at Covent Garden. The devotees improvised a temporary temple and soon recruited their first 3 British devotees. The newcomers at once took to the full Krishna-conscious regimen, including the dhoti and shaved head, and loved it. The devotees, thrilled to see their group expanding and Prabhupada's potency working, decided to phone Prabhupada from their landlord's office. The telephone was a conference phone, and Prabhupada's voice came over the little loudspeaker on the desk. The devotees sat around the desk listening intensely. "Prabhupada," Mukunda said, "we have some new brahmacharis here." "Oh, they're cooking chapatis?" Prabhupada asked from across the ocean. The devotees laughed uncontrollably, then hushed to hear more. "No," said Prabhupada. "No," said Mukunda, but they will be now. The devotees each told Prabhupada how they missed him, and he said he missed them too, and would come as soon as they get a place. After allowing the devotees 3 months in the warehouse at Covent Garden, the landlord announced that he needed to use the space and the devotees would have to move. The couples moved to 3 separate locations, and again their strong group spirit dissipated. Prabhupada began sending 2 or 3 letters a week to the scattered couples, praising them for their sincere determination. The devotees would gather regularly, if only to show one another their latest letters. Prabhupada wrote to Mukunda of his desire to preach Krishna consciousness in the West, specifically London. He said, "So far as I'm concerned, I always wish only to expedite my mission of life to spread Krishna consciousness in the western part of the world. I'm still firmly convinced that if I can establish this movement through the help of all the boys and girls who have now joined with me, then it will be a great achievement. I'm an old man, and there has already been warning. But before I leave this body, I wish to see some of you very strong in Krishna consciousness understanding. I'm very glad and proud also that you 6 boys and girls, although you have not been able to establish a nice center in London, still you have done your best. And the news has reached far away in India that my disciples are doing very nice work in Krishna consciousness. So that is my pride. I've received a letter from my godbrother informing me that it has been advertised in India that in Vietnam also somebody is spreading Hare Krishna movement. So there's no need to be disappointed. You go on with your work as best as Krishna gives you the opportunity, and there's no cause of your anxiety. Everything is going smoothly. But since you're now separated, the strength of your activities appears to be a little disturbed. Now you try to assemble together in the same spirit as you were doing, and in that case, temple or no temple, your movement will go on progressively. We are not much concerned about the temple, because temple worship is not primary factor in this age. Primary factor is Sankirtan. But sometimes we want a center where people may gather and see. So a temple is required secondarily. So try your best immediately to live together. I'm very much eager to see that you're again living together," unquote. For Srila Prabhupada's disciples, his instruction that they preach in London was much more binding than any other obligation. He was in their hearts, and they thought of him constantly. In carrying out his orders and trying to please him, they were constrained not by force or law, but by love. To please the spiritual master is to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and for Prabhupada's sincere disciples, to please him seemed the end in itself. Hare Krishna. Yeah, well, anyway, you're going to continue reading, of course, next to Kadasi, I guess. And shortly after, this is now coming up to June, late June 1969, very soon after, they will rent Seven-Berry Place, which was a block of offices with some residence, like 4 or 5 stories. and a basement. And so Srila Prabhupada came in late 69, but the temple was not ready. Shamsundar did a major construction job. Gosh, he got all this these big vertical blocks, and then like an arch over the top, all in redwood. Took a few months, so Prabhupada initially couldn't stay there, and he stayed up in Euston area, somewhere up there. Yeah, for a while, near Hyde Park. No, near Regent's Park. But then, not too long, like a few weeks, Prabhupada had been there probably a few weeks, and then the temple was ready enough, and they had the opening in very late 69, and Radhalanda and Ishwara were installed, and then Prabhupada came to stay. Hare Krishna. Any comments, questions? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.